Well, hello everybody. This is Danny again from Deep South Homestead. And guys, it is just a beautiful, bright day. As you can see the background behind me back here, it is almost so bright that you can't see the trees or anything. The sun's on me pretty bright. We've had some really some bad weather here lately. We had a really bad storm come through this past weekend and tore some shingles off my roof, and done a lot of tree damage, broke limbs out of trees and stuff like that. We've been having to go around and clean up all that stuff. But this morning is a beautiful morning. It's a little bit breezy this morning. Not really cold. It's 58 degrees I think right now, and it is 9:40 in the morning. Wanda and I have been working since daylight this morning. We have actually, we've accomplished a lot in a short period of time this morning. And the thing that amazes me about this is the fact that because we've set an ecosystem up here the way we have, everything kind of takes care of itself. And I really like that, because it makes it so much simpler for me and her to do things. Wanda tied tomatoes this morning. We tied probably 150 tomatoes. I put out liquid phosphorus to a high phosphorus fertilizer food from called Bloom and Grow from Dr. Earth. I put that to every one of the tomato plants on this hill over here, the pepper plants. Wanda tied tomatoes in the high tunnel. I phosphorused everything in the whole high tunnel that needed it, that was blooming. We got that done. We moved to the front garden, and Wanda weeded the English peas while I set the Hoss tool up, the double wheel hoe, and a high arch double wheel hoe, and I plowed 4 rows of Cherokee yellow snap beans. Then Wanda came behind me, and the ones that was missing in the gaps, she replanted those. And I went and come over here and pulled up sweet potato draws, took them to the front garden where I already had the beds and the rows made up, and I put them in the ground. Then I put liquid phosphorus to all the English peas that was growing. And I put tomato cages around 30 more tomato plants in the front garden. Wanda picked all the bottom leaves off of them. I put liquid phosphorus around them. Then we decided, well, it's time to take just a small break. So we came to the house and we sat on the pier and ate our 9 o'clock snack, and it's now 9:42. And, we've been through for a few minutes. I threw the rod and reel out for a few minutes because I leave them on the pier. I have crickets down there. Caught 2 or 3 fish just for the fun of it. Threw them back in the water. And I told her, I said, you know what? It's time to go shoot porch time. And guys, that's what I'm deciding to do here. Just trying to chill out and relax, because we done all that from like 7 o'clock in the morning. Plus I fed the cows. We've already moved them. That's from 7 until 9, which was 2 hours. We was able to take care of our whole entire place here. We did the greenhouse, the high tunnels. We done this field over here. We done the front garden. We fertilized everything that we was going to fertilize. We planted extra places that we was going to plant. We weeded, cleaned up everything. And guys, that when you do an ecosystem that is supposed to work like it's supposed to work, then you don't have a lot of problems. I'm talking about large gardens. I'm not talking about small gardens. I'm not talking about 1 high tunnel. I'm talking about 2 high tunnels. And I'm going to try for just a moment before I get into porch time. I'm going to try to turn this camera just a little bit, because everything's looking washed out here, and I'm going to try to see if I can turn it to take care of that. Okay, maybe I got the camera in a little bit different position where everything around me looks a little bit better and it's not quite so washed out. It's amazing how you can get something just a little off, and the way the sun is shining through everything, it makes that much of a difference. But today, And yeah, everybody always says, man, you look awful like. Well, when it's like Billy, when Billy was here the other day from Permapasture's farm, when we were shooting our video together, he was like constantly looking out. He said, I can't help it. You know, when you're sitting here looking at all this, it's permaculture on steroids. And it's just, it's mind-boggling to watch. But guys, I want to talk a little bit today. I want to get serious for a few moments. And I really want to get down to some brass roots about something. And I want us to understand we've been targeted. And see, most of us don't realize that we've been targeted. But every living one of us has been targeted. You know, I used to teach a financial course by a gentleman that I had a lot of respect for because it's what helped me get out of debt really fast whenever I was younger. And it's Dave Ramsey. And guys, Dave Ramsey has a saying, live like nobody else so that you can live like nobody else. Probably one of the most profound statements that I've ever really heard. You have to understand and grasp the concept of what the man was talking about. And when I began to teach the course to other people, younger married couples and stuff like that, and college age young adults, I tried to do it in a way to make a profound impact on their lives. Because if there's anything in this world I hate, it is being in debt. It's scripturally wrong. God never intended for us to be in debt. But in the world that we live in today, for a lot of people, it's almost impossible. Mainly the younger generation and the older generation that made poor decisions, I guess you might say. And that's because we were targeted. Now I want us to go backwards for just a moment. And I want us to think. Now those of you who are not very old won't understand what I'm talking about. But those of you that have some age on you will understand what I'm talking about. It used to be that Dad got up and Dad went to work. Mom, well, let's go back even further than that. Let's go back a little further than that. Dad got up. Dad went out and tended to all the livestock. He tended to the fields and stuff like that, got everything laid out, and then he went to work. He fed the livestock in the morning, he done all this kind of stuff, then he went to work. Well, Mom stayed home all day, and she raised the kids. And she took the kids out into the gardens. The kids learned to garden. They picked the produce out of it. They brought it in. Everybody shelled and picked and shucked and done whatever they were doing, cut up or whatever you're doing, depending on the time of the year it was, the time of the year it is, whether or not it was fruit or it was vegetables out of the garden. You know, it was, apple picking season, pecan season, whatever. You know, just whatever the season was. Everybody got in on it. The kids learned from a young age what it was, where their food come from, how to prepare their food, what was involved in preparing their food. They learned life skills that benefited them in the long run, and they was able to carry that on over into their life. And most of the homes that people lived in were not fancy homes. I mean, they were houses that the dad had built, or somebody, maybe the grandfather had built earlier years in his life, and had passed on, and the father had inherited it, or maybe it was vice versa. It was a wife's family or whatever. You know, these are things that are skills. The sons would help the fathers, learning the trade that the father was in, doing the apprenticeship with the dad. These are all things that, you know, that life used to be like that. That's the way it was for me when I was growing up. I had the opportunity to learn how to hunt, to fish, all these different things, to farm, just all the things in life that really meant something. And just because I was a boy didn't mean I always done boy stuff. My mama was canning. I was right there in that kitchen. I was watching her. Son, get me this, get me that. You know, I was the oldest. My other siblings were younger than me, and you know, some of them could not be in the kitchen because of boiling water and, you know, different things like this, hot stuff, and Mom didn't want to run the risk of somebody getting, burnt or scalded or something like that. But she knew that because I was of age, I was, more aware of what was going on. But as time would go on, the family would be targeted. And what would happen is that we come to a point in American history where rather than the father just going out and purchasing some wood from an old sawmill or something and building a home, or chopping the trees down and making a log home, whichever one it was, and building something for the family to live in, it became where the government set it up where people had to begin to make bank loans to build homes. And to get them, used to you could get a house loan for 15 years, or no older than I am, in my 60s. I can remember when, if you got a 25-year house loan, man, that was way out there, and that's a big risk taken. Because I made that mistake in my younger years. I got a 25-year house loan. Boy, it didn't take me but about 5 years. I was out of that thing. And because I ain't paying no monthly note. No. I ain't paying them monthly notes on a house like that. That to me, that was the most ridiculous thing in the world. But the system was set up to where you had to do that. And then it used to, when I was a very young man, I bought cars for my family. I owned Camaros, I owned, Monte Carlos, pickup trucks, different vehicles like that. $2,500 to $3,000. You could buy a car that didn't have 20 or 30,000 miles on it. A good vehicle. And it would last for years. And a pickup truck, oh my God, they were real cheap. You could get a pickup truck for $1,000, $1,500. And a nice truck. But as time would come along, we began to be even more targeted. The powers to be, how can we put these people deeper in debt? How can we enslave them even more? Now you get a vehicle loan. Some of these vehicles is $50,000 and $60,000, and I fell prey to that in the construction business. I had 2 trucks cost me $80,000, and you finance them jokers for 5 and 6 years, and at the end of 5 and 6 years, that $80,000 you spent is a pile of junk. It's wore out. It's worth nothing. I sit back now, and me and Wanda talk about this. I said, all the money I spent in vehicles and construction, if I'd have took that money and went to an auction and bought trucks at auctions from fleets or something like that was auctioned off and had some miles on, rather than buying brand new ones, and took the money that I spent on them trucks and put it into land, I'd own a ton of land right now. And I told her, I said, what mistakes we make as people growing up, because we fall prey to the system of being targeted. And when they took moms and they fixed it where in order for a household to be able to survive, they made us with these 30-year mortgages on houses, and houses began to be, I remember my first house I had built. A company came in and built it, cost me $25,000. And I was like, oh my God, how much? That's a lot of money. I was like, man, will I ever pay that off? I remember my father. My father had a home built because he didn't have time to build it. He had a company come in and they framed it up for him and did all the outside work. And my dad hung his own sheetrock and done his own plumbing and stuff like that. But and put his own wood on the walls and stuff and done an addition onto it. His house note was $35 a month. And I well remember him as a young kid sitting there saying, talking to my mama, saying, Dora, I don't know how long we're going to be able to keep this house and pay that $35 a month. It's just a high house note. People just didn't make that much money. And then I come along and I financed one for 25 years. My house note was $225 a month. My daddy liked to have a gold goose egg. He's like, son, what in the hell have you done? And I said, Dad, I couldn't find anything any cheaper. He said, son, build your own. You've got the skill. And I told him, I said, but Dad, I was making excuses, and for 5 years I paid that $225 house note, plus the insurance that went with it. And at the end of 5 years, I looked at my daddy and I said, Dad, you were so right. I said, this sucks. I ain't paying this. I turned around and sold that farm, sold that house. I moved to another piece of property, Wasn't nothing but pine timber. Is all it was big pretty pine timber on land. And I cut the pine timber down, went in there and cleared the stumps out, and I started building me a house. I bought the material from a little bit of profit I had left off of the land I had. I had enough money from that land to pay cash for my next piece of property, and I began to cut trees down. I had a crew of men come in, and I sold the trees to them. I took that money, I went directly to the lumber mill itself where they cut the lumber from, and cut a deal with the man there and bought enough lumber to build my whole house out of and close it in on the outside. Now this was no windows, no doors, nothing like this. This was just framing a 2-story house for my family and I, and putting a porch around. I didn't even put a porch around it. It was just a house. And I came and I took off from work for about 6 to 8 weeks. I quit the job I was on, and I rented a house in town. Oh my God, like to have went stark raving nuts. I rented a house in town to live in while I built my home. And when I got that house, I called it blacked in. It didn't have nothing on the inside but just studs. You could see through the whole house, just studs. On a cold February day when the temperature was 20 degrees, I had managed to get one door and one window. I moved my family into that house. No electricity, no heat, nothing. No wood stove. We moved into that house. Guys, we slept under heavy quilts, and my kids and us all in one room in there. And then we got a little old tiny wood heater and put in there in the great room that was in it. And I would cut wood and put in that wood heater, and we'd try to do as good as we could, but there was no insulation in it anywhere, nothing like that. I was in the process of wiring it in the evening times and trying to get some plumbing hooked up in it and stuff like that. I had a well put down, and we were just roughing it. But you know what? We did that for like 2 to 3 years until I got that house completed. And guys, that's what we done. That's how we survived. But now, you can't do that where I live at now. Because you've got to have a permit for this, so you got to have a permit for that. And you can't live in the house until you get an occupancy permit. They won't turn any power on. And that's, they tried that on me here, and I told them, I said, I'll tell you what. I said, you ain't stopping me from moving in my house. I built this house right here I'm living in now. I moved in it just like I did with that one, when there was nothing but just studs on the wall. I had plumbing done, and I had the outside walls insulated, and the roof over my head. I slept on the floor in an air mattress, me and my wife did, and we lived in that house for 3 years like that until I got it blacked in. They were like, well, we're not going to do this, or we're not going to do that. I told them, I said, you can kiss my behind, because I don't give a care. I'll live in it just like that. I don't care if it's got electricity. I don't care if it don't have electricity. I'm going to live in it anyway. It's my property. I pay taxes on this place. You're not coming in here telling me what I'm going to do on my right, because this is my constitutional rights to live on my land, live the way I want to live. It's a God-given right. It's not your right to tell me what to do. And man, I made some enemies with some local officials. But you know what? I did it anyway. And I roughed it out. My wife and I, we toughed it out. We got it done. But guys, we're targeted today. I mean, they look at us today on our own property and they tell us, you can do this and you can do that, or you can't do this or you can't do that. I don't comply. I just look at them square in the face and say, I'm sorry. I'm not going to do it. You know? And I know I may go to jail one day. It may happen. But I'm sorry. I was sitting in my house the other day. I'm going to tell you a story that goes along with this. I was sitting in my house the other day. My monitor went off in my house, and I looked on there, and I saw the top of a pickup truck coming across the back of my property back here, driving up to my cabin. I come up out of that chair with my pistol, jumped in that Ranger, and I come across my pond dam, and when I got to my pond dam right here, that pickup truck was fixing to come across the top of my pond dam. I stopped them, jumped out screaming like a raging banshee. I told them, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing on my property? Y'all have to excuse my French today, because there's some things that just really piss me off. One of them's coming on my property without my permission. I don't care who you are. If you're a law, I don't care. I stopped this vehicle and I went over there and I looked and I recognized one of the gentlemen in it. And I said, what are y'all doing on my property? And he said, well, we've been watching that cabin bill for going on for about 3 years now. And I see that you're not through with it, so we're not gonna tax you on it just yet. Not the full tax on it just yet. But we just wanted to drive back in here and look. I told him, I said, let me tell you something. You back that dadgum truck up right where it's at, and you get off my property. If you want to come on my property, here's my phone number. You call me before you come on my property. Guys, this is the way the system looks at it. They look at it like any local official thinks that they just have the right to go anywhere they wish on anybody's property, when our constitutional right tells us we have a right to protect that which is our own. And I told him, I said, you can turn around and go back out just the way you came in. He said, we can't go across this pond dam? I said, no, you're not going across my pond dam. You're going to go back in the way you went. I know they was doing it because they just wanted to snoop around. That's all it was. And I have nothing against these people. And I told him, I said, if you want to come back on my property and you want to look at my property, then have the courtesy to call me before you come on my property. And guys, we're targeted as an individual today. All of our rights are being taken from us. And the problem is, these guys stated, well, nobody ever says anything. We just go on people's property and we look and nobody says anything. And I'm like, yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'm not everybody else either. The whole world's full of a bunch of dumbass snowflakes out there that literally don't have a backbone at all. They literally are nothing but a bunch of jellyfish out here that's calling themselves people and men, trying to, you know, I don't know. It's just bad, guys. It's just bad. You know, and the thing about it is, God says in His Word, I have a plan for you, and it is good. Now, it doesn't state it just exactly like that, but I'm paraphrasing it. That's what it means. I know the plans that I have for you, and that they are good. And when we sit back as individuals and we don't take care and protect what God gave us, and be citizens who will stand up and protect what was been rightfully, we pay for. We pay taxes on it. We pay notes on it. We do these kind of things. We work our butts off. And then we come in and we sacrifice to have what we have. We live like nobody else so that one day we can live like nobody else. That's what I tell people. They're like, yeah, but you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Bull crap. I was so poor when I was a child. I mean, we had to sit on a sack of fertilizer to raise an umbrella. I told a guy the other day. I said, that's how poor we was. I mean, we couldn't afford shoes. We painted our feet brown and laced our toes up. That's what I come up, I told him, I said, that's how bad it was. And my wife and I, we've busted our butts to have what we have, so that one day we can live like nobody else. And that's where we're at. And guys, until you come to the point in your life where you're willing to sacrifice and you're willing to stand up and have a backbone about things that's being taken away from you, and you're willing to sacrifice for what you have, and try not to build a freaking mansion when you build a house. I got news for you. Those of you who are fixing to get ready to build houses now, is building all these homesteads, good freaking luck. Because I'm going to tell you something. I'm getting word in every day from different places. Supplies are fixing to run very short. And the supplies that are out there is fixing to be 2 or 3 times what they originally cost. If you're going to build a house, you better buy yourself a wood miser sawmill and a chainsaw. And you better get a piece of property that's got a bunch of good timber on it, and get out there and cut your own trees down and sawmill them jokers up and build your own house. And I'm gonna tell you what, when you get it built, you ain't getting no insurance on it, because most insurance companies won't finance a house that's built with rough cut lumber because it ain't been run through a kill dryer, because it might have bugs in the lumber, it might eat the house down, they said, which is probably one of the far-fetched things that you'd ever find, unless you use dead timber. Now, dead timber does have bugs in it. My house I'm living in over right here, I cut a lot of the timber off of my property and framed most of that house out of. Had a sawmill come in and done my house that exact same way. I said, I'll be dadgum. I don't care if you don't want to give me insurance or not. It doesn't bother me. Do you think your forefathers cared if they had insurance? Insurance didn't even exist when you had forefathers. But if you go borrow a ton of money, that bank's going to look at you and they're going to go, you know what? You got to have insurance on that house. You're not going to borrow money and use rough cut lumber and build a house in most places. You got to think about these things when you get ready to build a house. I mean, I was in the construction business for 27 years. I can tell you horror stories about this kind of stuff. In the world that we live in, God never intended for it to be like this. It's like the children of Israel, after they had sinned against God and they were thrown into Babylonian captivity, they began to freak out. Oh Lord, what do they? They fell on their knees before God and said, God, what do we do now that we're in captivity? You know what he told them? He told them a couple of three things. Build houses, plant gardens, obey the laws of that land, marry, have children, because you're going to be there for about 70 years. They didn't balk the system. Christ didn't tell them because a foreign country come in and invaded you and took you over. He didn't tell them to balk the system. He told them to obey the laws of that land. Build houses, marry, plant gardens. I thought that was great. Plant a garden. Eat your own food. That's straight from the Lord. You know, I mean, that's one thing that I love about the Lord's Word. The Lord's Word, when He puts it out there, guys, He puts it out there just as blunt and plain as it can be. It don't matter if you agree with it or not. It doesn't change it. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't matter. I have people on my channel all the time leaving me comments. Well, I don't believe this, or I don't agree with that. I don't care if you do or not. It ain't my word. It's God's word. You know, and it doesn't mean anything to me. You can disagree with it all you want. You cannot believe there's a God if you don't want to. I don't care. I'm not the one when every knee and every tongue, every knee will bow and every tongue's going to confess that He's Lord, and He's going to look at you and say, depart from me, for I never knew you. That don't bother me a bit. Now, I hate it for you. I'd like to see you get born again. I'd like to see you be able to go to heaven and us sit down by that river with the 12 trees planted there, and the leaves of those trees are for the healing of the nations. That's one thing that got me right there. The leaves of the trees are for the healing of nations. Guys, there's power in leaves of trees. I did a study on the country of Georgia. Now, not the state of Georgia, but the country of Georgia. During my wife's cancer, people over there were living to be 100 to 150 years old. And they made a tea from the leaf of blueberry trees. Not the blueberries, but the leaves of the blueberry trees. And they drank the glacial milk, the water that flowed from underneath those glaciers that was loaded with minerals. And they drank the tea of the leaves of those blueberry trees. Some of them lived to be 100 to 150 years old. But when they brought in the Western food system and the culture to that country, people's lifespan dropped drastically. Now that should tell you something right there. But guys, today, stop and think about the simple fact. We've all been targeted today. That's what I hate from my kids and my grandkids. When it comes time for them to build a house, when it comes time for them to buy land, there's not going to be any available. Because the powers to be, Mr. B, Mr. BG, whatever you want to call them, all these people are buying up the farmland as fast as they can. And now they're talking about climate control, spraying the atmosphere and all this kind of stuff. And Mr. B's talking about, you can't have but one hamburger a month or something like this. We got to get rid of red meat. And I'll tell you what, it'll be a cold day in Hades when they get rid of my meat. I'll go out here and shoot a squirrel and still eat that sucker. They're not going to take my meat away from me. In order for my body to thrive, I have to have a protein source at least every 2 hours because of my physical condition. And I'm not the only one out there. There's lots of people out there. You're not going to take that away from me. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And guys, but they want to. They want to control every aspect of your being. God never intended for it to be that way. Our forefathers gave us inalienable rights. That's what the Constitution is. That's what our Second Amendment is. It's an inalienable right for us to be able to protect ourselves, because they knew that the day that the powers to be had total control, that then we would have no way to take care of ourselves or to defend ourselves. Now, I'm not allocating violence in any way. I don't believe in it. But I also believe, just like my daddy taught me, son, don't ever start a fight. But if somebody else does, you make darn good and sure you finish it. And that's just the way I was raised. That's the mentality I have. I'm probably the most easygoing person on the face of the earth, as long as you don't cross. That's the way we were raised. And there's nothing wrong with that. The guys, I've been targeted. You've been targeted. The system has been set up to where we cannot live the life that was intended by God for us to live, because the powers to be, they want us to be deep in debt. They want to take our rights away from us. They want us to be able to not be able to do what we want to do, to have to go and be a slave to a job every day of our life, rather than being able to back away from a job and be able to come and live on your property and raise your own food. They want to try to stop you from raising your own food because they say you're not smart enough, you don't have the sense enough, because you're allowed to get yourself sick and then have a big medical bill, and then the government's going to have to foot part of this medical bill because you didn't have the right kind of insurance to take care of it. Well, screw them. That's the way I look at it. I'm going to raise my food as long as I've got energy in my body. And guys, I'm going to tell you, a lot of you don't believe in the grand solar minimum. I don't care if you believe in it or not. The historical data is there. A lot of people go, yeah, but the internet's been manipulated. What you're reading is not real. Look, every nation on the face of the earth that is an old nation has manuscripts of their pasts. If you go back and read where Magellan and Christopher Columbus, all these people came into America, even at the whatever different periods in history they came here, Lewis and all them, Lewis and Clark that went up the Missouri, Mississippi River, all them, look at their writings. Guys, they talk about the weather in those writings. Look at the period of time. Go back and do the scientific study. What was going on at that time? Many times we were in the middle of a solar minimum. Sometimes we were in a grand solar minimum, whether it was an Eddy minimum, a Maunder minimum, a Dalton minimum, whatever which one it was. Some of them are every 400 years, some of them every 2,000 years, whichever. It is a cycle that the earth goes through. Doesn't matter what we do, the earth is going to do this. And when the earth goes through these things, like during a grand solar minimum, if you go back and look during any grand solar minimum that we have a record of, and I'm going to tell you, Sasha Dobler, a friend of mine from Sweden who is a scientist, has a book out that we showed on our live stream the other night called Solar History. Probably one of the most intelligent books. He's right up there with Valentina Zarkova as far as writing stuff like this. He goes back and breaks down the different civilizations and talks about what was going on weather-wise during all these civilizations. And guys, the rise and fall of empires happened during these minimums. It has nothing to do, I don't care if you believe it or not, but I'm going to tell you right now, anything above the 35th parallel in the United States and across the world, get ready. It's going to be hard to grow anything in the next coming years. This year should have been a wake-up call for you. Look at the violent weather we've had. Look at how I am 3 weeks behind on my garden, and I'm in the South. I went back and looked at my records the other day, Wanda and I. This time last year, we had done canned, I don't know how many jars of English peas. We were already had tomatoes we were picking. We were already picking our snap beans. We'd already dug we're getting ready to dig all of our potatoes. None of my stuff is ready this year. Now, we are picking in the high tunnels. We're picking snap beans, but they're in a high tunnel. My records are talking about stuff that was outside. I looked at the temperatures, and they were a lot different than what they are now. We're so much cooler this year than I was last year at this time here. Guys, I mean, it doesn't matter what you believe. I'm fixing to put in more high tunnels. If the Lord will grant me the finances in the next year or two, and the Lord willing that they're still able to produce them and make them, and I can afford one, we're going to put more high tunnels in, because I'm telling you, it's going to become the way of the future. Right now, the stuff in that high tunnel down there, I'm picking squash, snap beans. I got tomatoes that's blooming like beautiful. We got kale running out our ears. I mean, I'm picking my big onions and pretty onions all in there. We've got stuff just going crazy. I've got peaches on trees already in there that just looks absolutely beautiful. I've got oranges on trees in one. I've got big old huge blackberries all over everything in there. I mean, guys, the high tunnels are the way it is. Now, I'm not talking about a greenhouse. I'm talking about a high tunnel. Greenhouses are very difficult to grow in unless they're climate controlled. That high tunnel is just what it is. It's high, and it's a tunnel, and it's covered, and you can control the heat in it in the summertime, and you can control the cold in it in the wintertime. It's the way to go. Guys, don't be targeted anymore. Do not allow yourself to be targeted anymore. If you're in debt, get out of debt. Whatever you have to do, sacrifice whatever you got to sacrifice. Get out of debt. If you're in a vehicle that's a $40,000, $50,000 vehicle, get out from under it. Get you a vehicle that's not that expensive. Get you something that you can pay for, and pay for quickly, because I'm telling you guys, you can mark it down. In the near future, life as we know it is going to change. It's not because I said so. It's because the Word of God has already told us that in the latter days of the age, and it's not the end of the world, but the latter days of the age that we live in, it will take a day's wages. Listen to me. It will take a day's wages to buy enough food to feed one person. Y'all watched our live stream the other night. We talked about a friend of ours. His daughter went to buy groceries this past week. She normally spends $200 every 2 weeks on just groceries. Now, this is not paper products. This is not baby stuff. This is not cleaning supplies, just groceries. This week, it was $400 for the same stuff. It had doubled. Guys, the Word of God is going to be true. Think about that. Look at the prices of things where you're at. Look at the price of lumber. Look at the PVC pipe prices. Anything you want to look at, look at the prices of everything. It is beginning to skyrocket. But is your pay going up to match it? Most of us is not. Something to think about, guys. Guys, we got a nut on the road out here on the crotch rocket right now, running up down the road, making a lot of racket. I want you to get off of here, and I want you to think about this. I want you to think about what Dave Ramsey says, his saying, live like nobody else, so that one day you can live like nobody else. Thank you, guys, from Deep South Homestead.